Let me introduce myself. I'm Rick James, and I've been writing and researching West Coast maritime history. Oh gosh, from the late 1980s. But I'll just give you some personal background, and I feel like I was sort of qualified for it because I feel like I've been a real West Coaster. I was born and raised in Victoria, and I took an interest in the ships right from the start because my dad was a career Navy, Chief Petty Officer, first class gunnery instructor in Victoria, and I was just became fascinated with naval vessels. And I was through the 1950s when I was growing up, I was building many of the models that you could get, and I got very taken with that. But and so like being as far as, but we did spend our families back then a lot of time out in the water. Dad was a very sort of competitive guy, and he wanted to be out there sports fishing for coho and spring salmon and trying to catch the big one there. And so we spent a lot of time as a young guy out on the water through the southern Vancouver waters, the southern Vancouver Island waters, primarily Cowichan Bay and Saanich Inlet. And introduced to being out on the water at an early age. And then for a while I was part of the counterculture in the late 60s and tuned in, turned on, and dropped out. And was around Victoria. But what was really cool is so many of us counterculture characters and people, hippie types from the late 60s, early 70s, a bunch of us had moved up to, I was living in the Comox Valley for 2 years, up Fraser Road up by Courtney, but then I heard about Sointula, where and it just so happened, it was just a fantastic paradise, Malcolm Island, Sointula, and a lot of counterculture, hippie types, draft dodgers that moved to Sointula. And it was, the economy was just going great, and there was the fishing, commercial fishing was just doing wonderful, making big money back in those days with the Fraser River sockeye coming through Johnstone Straits, and it was great. They were so desperate for crew, they were even hiring us long-haired hippies off the dock. It was most entertaining. So I got on seiners, working up on the coast, that part of the coast. So I was back out on the water, and it was a great introduction to getting to explore all around the coast, and it was really cool talking with the old, all the boats were wood then, and it was neat finding out about their history and where they were built and all that. And I got fascinated with that. And and then I was a career tree planter up there off the north end of the island. So I was all around wandering all over the landscape up there, tree planting as well as being out on sailboats out on the water. But eventually I left and I moved down to the Comox Valley. And that's when I started getting really intrigued by researching ships and that. What was fascinating was the Royston hulk breakwaters, like 15 ships hulks that were sunk there. And in the late 1980s, I went down there. They were all been stripped and used for a breakwater to protect the booming grounds for the log dump of Comox Logging and Railway. But the thing was, because they were stripped hulks, just sunk as a breakwater, nobody had identified them. So I took that on, and that's when I learned that researching is very educational. It's like the biggest reward from writing books and researching is, wow, did I ever learn a lot? And I did learn a lot. There was not only World War II frigates there and old steam tugboats, but there was 3 or so warships from the Canadian Navy, one from the American Navy, but there was 3 Cape Horn windjammers, and it was really neat researching their history. And when that culture it was out there, the age of the Cape Horn windjammer, and steam powered many of them, and I just learned a lot about writing, or about you know, how everything was managed out on the sea. There's various vessels, you know, and the transition from steam and sail to what we got today. You know, it was, yeah, very educational. So that was my first big project that got me going, researching and writing. And then I got in the mid 1990s, because I was also submitting stories, started submitting stories to Victoria Daily Colonist Islander magazine about twice a year, and some to what is Western Mariner magazine today. I got intrigued with shipwrecks along the coast and different, you know, history along our coast, and I was getting published like twice a year in the Victoria Daily Colonist Islander, and a couple in the Mariner, and yeah, it was really rewarding. And then finally I got, but I must comment, my biggest kick in the pants was from my partner Paula Wild to get me researching and writing when we got together in the mid 1980s. Like, I was just a laid back character. I'd moved down to Fanny Bay from Sointula, and I was just laid back life there and quiet. And she started writing books. She was writing articles. And I said, oh, I'd like to be a writer. And she just said, don't talk about it, just do it. Don't talk about it, just do it. And so that was my instinct. So I just got going. And once I got going, it was great. Yeah, she's published a number of books. Paula Wild, big one was Sointula Island Utopia, a book on cougars, on wolves. It all scientifically backed by talking to all the scientists of that. Book on the Bella Coola Valley. Yeah, so yeah, I moved on from there, and then finally I got a book published through Harbor Publishing, who she was connected with, which was great having that connection. She'd been already established, had a books with them, and just getting connected with them, and what was I told about all my articles I'd had published, and Howard White over in Harbor Publishing, and we make a compilation of all these stories. And so I got Ring Coast Chronicles 21, West Coast Wrecks and Other Maritime Tales was published, where all these different stories about our maritime history all along our coast are all different stories, you know, like not only ships and that, but I did looked into the history of the East Hope engine and how that came about, and different angles like that. Yeah, I should note that, yeah, I did have experiences you know, my working on the water and seeing boats and that out of Sointula Alert Bay, and yeah, tree planting, and yeah, I got all over the place. And then, yeah, as far as keeping employed, then I finally, Paula said, you know, I kept saying of tree planting, don't use your brain much, and I thought I should go back to school. And she said, oh, North Island College is just up the road. Just don't take short courses up there. And I go, oh, right. And then so I went to doing that in the off season, tree planting. And I eventually won at Simon Fraser, got my BA in history and archaeology, and then got to work all over the province as a field archaeologist with different consultants all through the province, wandering all over the place. But then I've sort of been retired now and got into seriously more into writing. But I have this sort of part-time job that is just so rewarding and wonderful as a relief lighthouse keeper. What people don't realize is we have 27 manned lighthouses on the coast. And a couple of them, there's only one keeper on the lake because it's close to a town like Cape Mudge out on Quadra Island. But nearly all of them, except for a couple, and then Pulteney Point on Malcolm Island, Sointula, it only needs the one keeper. But most of them are two people out on the lake. And if anyone needs to go for a medical appointment, to take a vacation or visit family, they can reach into this pool of relief light keepers to stand in for them while they're off the light. And so I can be in a relief assistant lightkeeper, and it's just been wonderful because I'm out there on the coast again, all up and down the coast, out there on the water, staying in touch. Like I said, been a real west coaster all my life, and it's just great to stay connected.